Hello, welcome to our series Ace the LNAT, and today we will cover the dreaded LNAT essay. We will run over all things prompt, all kinds of essays, all kinds of prompts, and we would also try and run over an example just so that you have an understanding of how to counter this essay and what is the best strategy to take as a student who hasn't studied the law before to counter a legal case or to go forth even arguing a legal case. So the LNAT essay is typically about 750 words. That's the upper limit that you're given. You have about 40 minutes to finish the essay. This is the last section of your LNAT after you finish the multiple choice section. And this actually is one of the disadvantages, is because you're so tired from the previous section that the essay really demands a lot from you. And because the essay is the creative part where you show yourself off to the universities in terms of the way you think, the way you argue, it is stressful because you're absolutely exhausted. Then you've strained your logical reasoning skills in the previous section on the 42 questions before. But it is a bridge that we have to overcome, and let's do that together. So the way the LNAT essay works and is graded is that one of the 5 universities on your UCAS, especially obviously the ones that accept the LNAT and you're writing the LNAT for, they will correct your essay. One of them will be given the essay by Pearson VUE, and they will correct the essay, mark it according to their own parameters, and that will get attached to your final LNAT score and be sent to different universities. So the topics of the LNAT essay span from everything to do with abortion to the space race to private property to representation in legislatures. So it's a very wide range of essays and range of topics that you can expect to come your way. You usually get 3 options, out of which you select one to eventually write the essay on. So typically you should write about 550 to 600 words at least is what is expected of you from Pearson VUE and the universities you apply to. But I would suggest somewhere around the 600-650 mark is a good place to be in those 40 minutes. In terms of how does one go about arguing, right? And a lot of people have this question, is that your point of view doesn't matter, right? Your point of view isn't what is going to be considered. So a lot of people might have some convictions that I perhaps have to show off a certain conservative view because I'm applying for a historically conservative college, or I have to show off a liberal view because I'm applying for a more liberal college. It's not of that sort. You need to make a strong case for whichever side you take. And your case making and your ability to really logic your way out of the case and take counterpoints, look at what the opposition on this particular topic is and counter it perfectly, is what really LNAT tutors are looking for. And therefore, again, your perspective only matters as much as you can convince them of it. So it does not matter which side of the debate you're on, no matter what topic you're presented. It's about the case you argue and not so much your own perspective. You're not judged on your opinion or your perspective, but your case, only your case. One of the biggest tips that I will give you before we even begin is never ever stay on the fence. And in the real world, if you're a lawyer and if you have a client and if you're ever arguing a case, at no point should the judge or at no point should the opposing party ever be of the conviction that you're actually on their side. Never ever on the fence. Always stand with your client and always stand with the subject at hand, with your perspective and your case that you're making for. Now, if we were to dive into my format, my personal format, and this is a format that I designed looking at lots of feedback that I had received and lots of work that I had put through. So this requires a certain amount of practice to be able to use this format. But in my eyes, I believe this is the best way to counter the LNAT essay. And it answers the prompt very well. It also gives some space to debate and some space to maneuver around and really take on points from the opposition. So I think the very, very first point that you need to take care of is the way you divide your time. You have 40 minutes, out of which 10 minutes you need to plan. No matter what happens, those 10 minutes you're going to plan. Yes, that is going to cut short the time that you actually do write in, but those 10 minutes are essential for you to plan. And you make mind maps, you put down points, whatever you're comfortable with, but those 10 minutes are extremely important for your essay. So let's start with the introduction. Let's take the introduction into context. And I think the first thing you start with is a hook. Now, hook statement is usually a statement that you put out or you write to immediately capture the attention of your audience. It's a statement, it's a fact, it's a claim, it's a quote. It's something that if I read, I'm immediately drawn to your paper, your essay. Second, you need to define the terms. Define the terms that are present in your prompt. So if your prompt says something about justice and security, define what justice and security are according to your paper. So you can claim that this paper would use the words justice and authority or justice and security, and this is what these terms mean. It's very important for you to define those terms so there's no ambiguity left out. You need to be able to close and create the bounds of your essay. And of course, please in the introduction, in your third line, you write down, this essay will argue dash dash dash. So you need to be able to establish your claim or your thesis statement within the third line. So this is your introduction. Now your main body, I usually split into three parts: X, Y, and N. Now I'll explain to you what X, Y, and N are. So X is essentially your first claim, Y is your second claim, and N is your nuance point, and we will get to that. So in X, you want to be able to make the first argument that you do, right? What is your first claim? Why do you believe in this prompt? Why do you agree with this prompt? Why do you disagree with this prompt? X is the reason I do. Here you can even accommodate X dash, which I've put down, which X dash is taking on a counterclaim. So state your point, explain it maybe in a line or two, and then say, the opposition might say, or people who oppose this bill say, or people who oppose the statement say, and then you counter that claim. So that's X dash. Then you go to point Y, which is your second claim. So I agree or I disagree with this prompt because also Y. Again, one or two lines explaining what your claim is. And there's also room here for Y dash to take a counterclaim. And of course, try and relate Y dash to Y. That's the reason it's Y dash, or X dash to X. It's so that you can take counterclaims in the same breath as you put out your claims. And we will come back to how to go about this when we come to the example. And then there is N. Now N is a special one. N is really something that I feel becomes the cherry on top of your LNAT cake. It is the nuance point. It is really a place for you where you can actually at some point show that you're able to understand this prompt and the debate around it so well that you can actually relate it to the real world. So here you want to put down real world examples. Here you want to put down a pragmatic element to it. Maybe if you're discussing a policy, how would it actually pan out in the real world? So some sort of an example, some sort of nuance to the claims you've made. It's a great way to end the main body. And of course, then you have the conclusion. In conclusion, there's not a lot of stress, there's not a lot of work to do. You end with saying, in concluding, reaffirm your statement and explain why. So in concluding, reaffirming the statement, your claim, your thesis, because of X and Y. And that's the way you conclude. So this is the format that I follow, and we will run over an example. Now we're going to run over a prompt that's actually come in the LNAT before, and something that you definitely should practice because there are going to be questions of this caliber. So the prompt is, or the statement is, that judges should be elected, not appointed. Agree or disagree with the above statement. So let's dive right into the introduction using the format that we did. The hook statement that I would use is, judiciaries form the spine of modern democracy. Again, a claim which is out there, it's a statement. It hooks the reader into diving deeper. I will define what is elected and I'll define what is appointed. And then my thesis statement is, I disagree with the statement that judges should be elected, not appointed, And this essay will illustrate that election of judges is against the interests of democracy. I've put my thesis statement and I've told you what this essay is about to do. Let's look at X, main body, X. Now, judicial decision making needs to be independent and non-partisan, because judicial decision making involves questions of morality, identity, nationalism, which requires an element of independence and non-partisanship. And if the judiciary were to cater to a certain section of the population or a certain individual, the goals of the judiciary will not be able to be met. We will not be able to have those questions, those discussions. We will not be able to move towards a more moral society. And X dash, perhaps an opposing claim could be, but isn't democracy about the people's voice and governance? Judicial decisions and judges make decisions just based on what the majority wants at the time, or just on what the popular statement or the popular ideal at the time is, isn't perhaps in the interest of the goals we've set out for our judicial system. And therefore it has to be extremely objective and non-partisan. If that independence is not given to the judiciary, we will not be able to conduct judicial process in light of where we want to be, or where we ought to be rather. So questions of morality, questions of identity require wisdom and experience, and that can only come through by appointing, nomination. It's not by popular vote or popular election. This is the point I would put an X. I think I missed that. Coming to Y, second point. So the election of judges will blur the lines between judges and ministers of parliaments or MPs, and because of this, as of course you need to be elected the same way MPs do, they will have to fundraise, campaign, create manifestos, which will promise things that will change as per context. And that's true of every individual that's elected into the parliament, is that the manifesto changes every cycle to be able to pander to the promises that are being made of the time and what is relevant of the time. So the line between judges and MPs will get blurred. A counterclaim could be, but MPs are voted in as they're capable to govern by the constituents, right? So why not the same with judges? If the constituencies believe that, and the constituencies and the constituents believe that MPs are capable enough to run the government, why not the same with judges? And here you can speak about unpopular rulings and judgments, which are a must, right? There have to be times when judges have to make decisions which probably do not pander to their constituencies or do not pander to their constituents. These could be questions of identity, these could be questions of resource sharing, and at this point, a judge must think in the interest of the entire country, the entire nation. And perhaps they won't be able to if they're elected through a certain constituency or through a certain vote bank. And this, again, the larger claim is that these unpopular rulings and judgments may not actually cater to the voters in lieu of justice. And therefore, you would be sacrificing justice for popular vote. So what is the nuance point here? What is point M? Now, courts have previously stopped populist leaders and autocrats from creating these regimes and reinforcing their claims over their regimes through matters of judicial independence. So through judicial independence, they have constrained these individuals from doing so. Blatant human rights violations. Autocrats and technocrats have usually been stopped by judges themselves, and that can only be done if they're non-partisan and independent. You can take an example of someone like Indira Gandhi here in India, whose 42nd Amendment, which reinforced her claim over who the true electoral majority is in the country, was struck down by the courts, was struck down by the Allahabad High Court, and is one of the first ever examples actually of a court stopping something called democratic backsliding. You can read more about it. I will link it here somewhere. And I will end with point N with saying, in today's world, courts are actually extremely important to save liberal democracy. Liberal democracies are under threat, and courts are the only ones that can actually reinforce and stand up to these autocrats who are undermining liberal democracy. Conclusion. Now, what would the conclusion look like? Again, like I said, begin with in concluding. Judges must be appointed and not elected, as they must remain impartial and separate from the political party in power to remain non-partisan. Again, it's a mix of X and Y. And reinforcing Y here again. Additionally, there would be no difference between MPs that fancy the popular vote, again, according to the electorates and the constituents, and judges if they are elected. So this is how I would look at the LNAT essay, and this is how I break it down. This is how I do it in my format. So in terms of some key points to remember, some very essential ideas that you need to remember while writing this essay, right, is you need to be first a lot more pragmatic than theoretical. And I'll explain to you what this means. You need to be able to put your work into practice. So what you claim, say if it's a policy decision, it needs to be more practical and on ground than theoretical. Rather than discussions on morality and rather than discussions on what ought to be, your argument must be bounded a little more practically, a little more pragmatically. And I'll tell you what I mean. It'll actually come forth in an example that I'll show you next. The next point that you need to remember is, why is this question being asked of me? What is the purpose of the LNAT asking me this question? This is very important. I'll give you an example. This also covers the last point. The question that I was asked in one of the sample tests and sample papers I was doing is, should people be allowed to own cars when there is the availability of public transport? And I went into a whole thing about socialism and the idea of private property and what is the public good and what should be private property and what should be public, when the idea here wasn't really that. I mean, the LNAT asked me a question about people having their own vehicles when there's public transport available, is because it has something to do with climate change, it has something to do with emissions, it has something to do with the deteriorating state of our planet. Now, of course, this is something that is quite intuitive. This is something that you would understand. I didn't, unfortunately. And therefore, I'm advising you that please ask yourself that question as to, why am I being asked this question? What does this prompt want from me? That's very important. I struggled a lot with it because I could only see questions in vacuum and I was trying to answer them through that. So again, my discussion was a lot more theoretical rather than pragmatic. It spoke a lot about the theory of things rather than the practicality of them. It didn't speak a lot about the policy, and that comes to my next point, which is think like a policy maker. You need to think like a lawyer, but also a policy maker. Think like that when you're answering the LNAT question, so that it gives you the ability to be a little more pragmatic. It gives you the ability to give something a little more tangible to the test. Of course, oppose counterpoints, and we do that through X dash and Y dash in our format. But please do oppose counterpoints. And the one question that you can ask yourself while thinking of counterpoints is, what would someone in a debate say to me? What would someone who's debating me about a conversation say to me to counter my claim? And then go forth and answer that. But do not strawman their argument. Do not, under any circumstances, strawman their argument. And by strawmanning their argument, it essentially means you cutting out their argument to make a very simplistic version of what they're trying to say in a way which doesn't really cover their point. So it's extremely important that you answer their claim in the fullest way possible, where you consider their point in the way it is. Another advice that I would give you that I struggle with is cut the fluff. Cut the fluff and keep it clean. You do not need extra words, you do not need big words, you do not need big vocabulary, you just need a clean case. Make that clean case, keep it as clean as possible, and remove the fluff. Makes it a lot easier for the person correcting your essay. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this took off some of the weight of the LNAT essay, which seems daunting. And if you would like to have a one-on-one session, if you would like me to walk you through all parts of the LNAT, including the questions and the essay, there's a link below to a form of a one-on-one tutorial with me. And of course, please do stay tuned to this channel. Do subscribe, do like the videos. There'll be a lot more coming in through the Ace the LNAT series, and a lot more to do with applications in general. Again, I also do help with the personal statement. So if you would like me to walk you through the personal statement, brainstorm, build, draft, and edit your personal statement with you, please, again, the same form in the link below. And if you do have something written up, if you do have some things written up for the personal statement that you would like me to have a look at, make it a lot more clear, a lot more concise and deep, proofread it and edit it, there's a link to my Fiverr below, which is running at an all-time discount, which you can make the most of. So do let me know if there's anything I can help you with regarding the essay, and any questions you have regarding the format, I'd be happy to answer them. Stay tuned for the next video in our Ace the LNAT series. Thank you and hope to see you soon.